Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the third annual Elevate Conservation Outdoors for All event. Now, this typically happens during the Outdoor Retailer Summer Market, which is taking place online this week, like everything else. This event, put on by over 30 Colorado and national organizations, outdoor industry companies, and diverse community leaders, is a way to honor the intersection of outdoor recreation and conservation, celebrate the ways we already work together, challenge ourselves to do more, and reaffirm the truth that equitable policies are good for us all. If you are a speaker of Spanish, if you speak Spanish, translation is available either by calling in to the number 857-216-2540 and using the passcode 78158, which will be added in the chat. Or if you are on Zoom, there is a translate function where you'll be able to hear what the panelists and what the speakers are saying in Spanish. As we go through the panel, there is a Q&A function. If you submit a question on Facebook or Zoom, please indicate who the question is for, and they will be funneled in and passed to the panelists as possible. To start this event, we would like to welcome Francis and the Denver Singers to welcome us to this virtual space and place and to ground us as we move forward.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'd just like to say thank you for inviting myself and my father over here to start this program off in a good way, your seminar and everything with conservation. And here in the Denver metro area, there's 60,000 Native people that live in the Denver metro area, representing all different types of tribes. Myself, I'm a Rikara, Hidatsa, and Navajo, and my father's a Rikara and Hidatsa. And those are some of the tribes that are here residing in. We have Lakota, we have Navajo, we have many number of tribes that are in the Denver metro area today. But over hundreds of years, there was a lot of tribes that even traveled through then, and they would follow the Rocky Mountains. They would follow the different rivers, the Platte River, and the other rivers, the Cherry Creek, the Sand Creek, and use them as kind of like a mapping system, and help to get them to all the different areas. And so in this area here around Denver, a lot of the Arapaho people have a lot of sacred sites that are in the Rocky Mountains, and then there's a lot of other tribes that have their sacred sites that are around, and many tribes would travel through even back then. And so, you know, this land here has always been a part of our culture and our history. And with that, you know, we're gonna begin by doing a little blessing, and I'm gonna light some sage. And I know each and every one of us, we have our own ways of praying. And so I'm just gonna ask for like a moment of silence, and we'll go into our own prayer. And I just ask for you to think of, you know, our actions and that stuff. And so that way we can have good feelings, good thoughts, and do good actions. And so that way we can think about the next 7 generations and how it will affect them. And so by you doing the conservation work, and I know you guys focus highly on our generations and our upcoming future. And so I commend you on your work. And so with that, I'd just like to ask for a moment of silence, and I'm gonna light some sage. And the sage comes from Mother Earth, and it represents a kind of a cleansing. The smoke itself, it rises and it goes to our grandfather, and we believe it carries our prayers. So with that, I just ask for you to be reverent for a few seconds while I light the sage. Medakase. All right, thank you. And at this time, we're gonna do a quick song, an honor song. I got my father with me here today, Mr. Frank Sherwood. And I don't know if I introduced myself. I'm Francis Sherwood. And we're gonna sing a song that's come from us from the Northern Ute tribe. And it's a song that's kind of uplifting. So to bring good spirits and good feeling to the meetings today. Once again, I'd like to say thank you for inviting us and just giving us the ability to start your seminars and your conferences off with hopefully a little bit of inspiration. Once again, thank you.
Thank you so much, Francis, and thank you to your father. I appreciate you opening the space for us in that way. As we hop into this event called Outdoors for All, well, my name is CJ Golding. I'll be your MC for this hour. Hopefully that means I'm out of the way most of the time, and that I'm setting the stage for the folks who you will be here to hear from. But real quick before we hop into that, part of what Francis talked about is the people who are at the heart of this. And I think as we head into this event and talk about the outdoors truly being for all, we can't do that in a bubble outside of the context of some of the things that are happening in this country right now. So we talked about Francis. Francis talked about his connection to nature. We have to honor and recognize the effects that COVID-19 has on our Indigenous communities, has on our Black communities, has on our communities from people of color. We have to understand that outdoors for all, outdoors and what is happening to our communities and to our people in this country are not mutually exclusive. So as we hop into this conversation, please listen to these voices who are leaders in this space of connecting people to nature, and learn from them, follow up on their work, and continue to support them. With that being said, that's probably the longest you'll hear me talk, and I will ask the panelists to turn on their videos to join me on screen, and to take some time to introduce themselves and to dive into today's conversation. Fantastic. Welcome, Angelica, Len, Wayne, and Teresa. I will ask you all to take 1 to 2 minutes to introduce yourself. Tell us about your passions, your impact on the world, and a little bit of what you're excited to chat about today. We'll start with Teresa.
Hi, I'm Teresa Baker, the founder of the Outdoor CEO Diversity Pledge, and I work on matters of diversity and inclusion in the outdoors. I do that through conversations like this and engaging people in outdoor spaces. So I'll leave it there for now.
Thank you, Teresa. Representative Rubio, you're up next.
Hi, everyone. My name is Angelica Rubio, and I currently serve as the New Mexico State legislator representing District 35 here in the great city of Las Cruces, which is along our border community of El Paso, Las Cruces, and Ciudad Juarez. I'm a fronteriza, born and raised. My parents are from Mexico, and so much of my work in the legislature is a direct it's a direct reflection of the values of which I was brought up in terms of really working towards protecting our land and making sure that it is accessible not only to ourselves, but for many generations to come. Serving in the New Mexico legislature last year, we created the first division, a division of outdoor recreation for the very first time. But in comparison to the rest of the West who have their own offices, ours is the first with an outdoor equity fund. So equity being at the center of outdoor recreation and conservation. And so I'm really excited to share more about that and about the work that we're doing here in New Mexico to really be a leader in making sure that we're not only just talking about equity, but that we're actually leading and making sure that we do it right.
Fantastic. Len?
Yeah, Len Asafar Yanishia, Nato Dina Tachi Inishla, Scottish Western Chin Donakai Dina Dasha Chair of Romanian Dashanale. I'm from the Navajo Nation. I grew up in a town called Saley, Arizona. I'm currently a professor of American Indian Studies at the University of Arizona here in Tucson. I work quite a bit in the outdoor industry, specifically in the skiing and climbing industries, and made a few films, done work there, mainly connecting Indigenous stories to these different sports. And then also a huge component of my work is working on the intersection of tribes, tribal sovereignty, and public lands. And I'm excited to parse that out and why, at least in the conversation of diversity, tribes need to be talked about in a little bit more nuanced way, specifically around those pieces.
Thank you, Len. And last but not least, Wayne. You might be muted, Wayne.
There you go. Sorry. Hey, CJ, thanks. Yeah, I'm Wayne Hare. I'm a retired backcountry ranger for the National Park Service, and then later for the Bureau of Land Management. I used to say BLM, but now people get confused. Prior to that, I worked at Dartmouth College outdoor programs, facilitated courses for Outward Bound, and I worked with the director of the National Park Service trying to create and understand the lack of diversity in both employees and visitors to national parks, and try to find some some way around that, some solution. Since retiring several years ago, I started a project in a nonprofit called the Civil Conversations Project, where I and a couple of other people, through writing and filming, we're trying to change the false narrative that America tells itself about race. The Civil Conversations Project. That's it. Thanks, CJ. Back to you, CJ.
All right. With that being said, let us hop into our very first question. All right. So we're here to talk about the idea of outdoors for all, and sometimes that gets approached in ways that look like more tokenism than partnership. What are some of the ways that outdoor and conservation organizations can move from tokenizing communities and individuals to true partnership? We'll start. Go ahead, Teresa.
What I'll say in regards to that is, this work is going to always feel like people are being tokenized, because it's not been focused on as heavily as it should have been, or as it should be. So until we start those relationships in a genuine way, it's going to feel tough. It's going to feel like we're tokenizing. But my hope is that we can move into the work beyond labeling it DEI. And once we can move beyond that, I think the tokenism part will hopefully fall by the wayside. But right now, it feels that way because these relationships that are currently forging have not been in place. So it's going to be rough, it's going to be tough, and people are going to be called out for it. But we have to keep moving forward in hopes of doing away with that stigma.
Yeah, CJ, just to add to that as well, I think Teresa is right on. And the moment that we're in, I think is incredibly important because it's really putting us in a position to really think through where we're going to move forward. Are we going to stay behind and go back to normal, as some people say, or are we really going to be intentional about how we move forward? And my hope is that as messy and as complex and ugly a lot of these conversations can be, particularly around race, that many in the outdoor community and the conservation community would be willing to actually move in that direction of being able to address some of these issues. I think a lot of times we're one issue organizations. We only care about maybe environmental issues and just specific to that, or public health, but it's all of our work is intersectional. And I think that many organizations and many folks in the outdoor retail, they need to understand that this is really a matter of life and death. Our ability to not only just access the outdoors, but to also address the issues of race and making sure that this racial analysis is at front and center of everything that we do. And I think that we are in a moment right now, and I hope that we can stay in that moment because liberation is something that we all must work towards, because if there's one person marginalized, then that's still not enough. And so how do we make that the center of the work here in the outdoor space, and making sure that we don't leave anyone behind?
CJ, I'd jump in if I could.
Absolutely.
You know, when that question comes up, it always leaves me with a sense that a lot of the onus to have people of color be outdoors is on white people. And you know, what are white people, white organizations going to do to facilitate that and make that available? And you know, I think that's a piece of it. But I've had so many, particularly Black young people and older people say, well, you know, we don't do that. You know, we're not, you know, that's a white thing. It's not part of our culture. And that always kind of shakes me up, because that's not true, that people of color have not been you know, deeply involved in the outdoors in every aspect of it forever. But it's also you know, tells me that people are buying into you know, stereotypes of themselves. You know, white people create the stereotype of what people of color do, and then some people of color buy into it. So I'll just leave you that I think the onus is you know, I don't think there are a lot of stumbling blocks. I think that the outdoor community is one of the more egalitarian places that we have in this country, and I just would like to see people of color, if they understand that the outdoors is for them too. They have a long history of being in the outdoors, and just feel free to jump into it.
Yeah, this is Len. You know, one of the things that I think around tokenism and the outdoor space is, especially around tribes, like there's such a unique relationship between tribes and the federal government. as domestic dependent nations, as the Supreme Court's defined us, but also just through treaty relationships and other multitude of executive orders, acts of Congress that basically ensure that we have some sort of seat at the table when it comes to management of public lands. And I think, there's I think a real distinction that needs to be made between the identity of being Indigenous versus the real political, legal definition of being Indigenous. And that's been something that I've seen as being confounded in the outdoor space. And I think one of the downsides of that is that it can undermine in big ways these legal fights that tribes are trying to undertake on just ensuring they have representation on their ancestral homelands. I mean, we can see with the most recent Supreme Court case of basically designating half of Oklahoma as continuing to still be Indian reservation, still highlights that point. And I think one of the things that I think looking in the outdoor space is like I've kind of had increasingly mixed feelings towards the role of land acknowledgements. While I do believe it does serve an important role to elevate Indigenous people and their relationships to their lands, I often have seen that basically the sort of involvement in engagement of Native people and the unique challenges that we face often end with the land acknowledgement. And, I do see that as reflective of the fact that most folks in this country receive pretty poor education about Indigenous people, the role of treaties, the role of, things like the Tucker Act. I mean, we can go on and on. But I think there's a big need that, especially in this time, if we're looking at conservation, tribes do have one of the more powerful hands when it comes to leveraging huge conservation gains, as we saw with Bears Ears and as we saw with the Arctic Refuge. So that's kind of my ideas on tokenism.
Awesome, thank you all. I will move to a second question, and then we'll do our best to take a question from the audience. So, we talking about tokenism and partnership is part of what exists right now. And part of, I think, in listening to writers like Adrienne, or reading and writers like Adrienne Marie Brown, she talks about envisioning the world that we want to step into. And so I'm going to ask you all to get creative. I'm going to ask you all to put your future hats on. I'm going to ask you all to envision this world a couple steps forward. And what, in your mind, what does a world where the outdoors is truly for all look like or include? A wish list. This could be something specific. This could be a policy. This can be a practice. This can be, a role that you or the communities that you come from are playing in that space. But what does a world where the outdoors is truly for all look like in your perspective? Wow, I stumped the panelists. I get an award.
CJ, I'm happy to jump in.
Go ahead.
Okay. A friend of mine just reminded me of a gentleman named Bob Stanton. He was the director of the National Park Service in late 90s and early 2000s. And he, in his desire and attempt to bring more diversity to the outdoors through the Park Service, he would often use the phrase that he wanted the Park Service to reflect the face of America. He wanted, when you drove through the gates or hiked in through a trail, you just felt like, rightfully so, that it shouldn't look exclusive to one group of people. So when you ask that question to me, what would it look like? I don't have any kind of program or policy or highfalutin answer really, other than just I agree 100% with Bob Stanton that what it would look like would be the face of America. It would be such a I think we'd be in a different place right now, literally today, if if we had greater diversity all over the place, and including or maybe particularly in the outdoors, that's what it would look like to me. It would look like, gee, I just walked through these gates and I'm looking at America as it actually is. Back to you, CJ.
Thanks, Wayne. Go ahead, Angelica. Oh,
that's a really great question, and I think for me, especially because I'm from New Mexico, I was born and raised here, that so much of our inability to have access to the outdoors for many in our communities is just because of the industries that dominate in the state. For one, we have a long history with our dependence and reliance on oil and gas, for example, which is pretty much handcuffed so many of our communities to really be able to access so much of our land, but also because they're industries that are making our community sick, and and it's industries that are making it impossible for us to actually reimagine something completely different. And so I think for me, really the way to really think through about how I want my state of New Mexico, for example, to look different, and what that would look like for the outdoors for all, is that we completely decolonize everything that we've ever been taught, everything that we've ever learned in terms of what it means to be in this state, trying to compete and get the things that we absolutely need for our communities, because of this this handcuffing that we have because of industries that exist here. I think once we can move away from those industries, as soon as we can no longer rely on that to be able to completely decolonize our minds from it all, is I think, one, a multi-generational project, which I believe can and should occur, but also but I also think that it's really possible. We just have to have the imagination to do so.
I think the way it relates to tribes is first honoring treaty agreements, and as we saw with Neil Gorsuch's alignment with tribes on that specific issue, he simply was reading the letter of the law. In Article 6 of the Constitution says that all treaties are law of the land, and simply he read that as is. And we saw that affirmation of that. And there's a lot of those that relate to access to public lands and management as well. If we look at our national park units, I think that there's an opportunity to think about what would co-management structures look like between tribes who call these areas home and the Park Service. There are examples of that. CritFic on the Columbia River, and then also Bears Ears was also trending that direction too, using CritFic's model. And I think that element is really key to looking at how do we leverage larger conservation gains. And then more broadly, I think when we start looking at honoring treaty agreements, that also means ensuring that tribes have access to these areas and can help shape their management, even if it's on, say, Forest Service land or whatever it may be. I think those are some things that can happen tomorrow if Congress so chooses to honor those treaties. And then at a state level, I think that there's an importance that states, especially here in Arizona, work towards collaborating with tribes rather than having an antagonistic relationship, which we see quite a bit of. And at least here in Arizona, much of the natural beauty that exists in the state is up north near tribal nations. And we've yet to see the gains of tourism that occur around that, specifically towards tribes, and I think there's a lot to be done there.
For me, the hope is that we bring storytellers into these areas, these natural spaces, be it national parks, state parks. I think moving forward, to have an equitable future in public lands is to have storytellers, Native Americans, Latinos, to tell the story, the history that isn't currently being told. And I think if we were to bring something like that into the parks, it would feel more welcoming and tell the stories that are no longer being told. So for me, that would be a good start in bridging the gap between the past, the present, and the future.
Awesome. And so we talked about what is. Teresa, you talked about bridging the past, the present, and the future. We talked about what is. We talked about what could be. And as the last prepared question, and then we'll get to questions that you all either have or can submit in the chat. For the last prepared question, what is one call to action that you would ask people to take? What is one step that one way you would like folks to come away from this conversation with a different goal, a different mindset, or a different step to make in truly making the outdoors a space that is for all?
For me, it's simple. Speak up, use your voice. Don't be afraid to cause good trouble, if you will. All too often, people think that one person can't make a difference. And I'm here to tell you one person can. So don't be afraid to use your voice and call in your representatives, your park agencies, your public land agencies. Make them hear you. So for me, that's it. Use your voice.
Yeah, I'm with Teresa as well. I mean, I think right now we're in a moment where we are being faced with reconciling so much of our past and where we need to move towards into the future. And it's imperative, I think, that we are looking to take much bolder and radical steps to make our world, our country especially, more inclusive. And we can't do that until we're willing to be brave enough to say the things that need to be said without feeling like there will be repercussions. And so I really do encourage people to say and speak out and do what they can. Also, I mean, we have a big election coming up in November. Elections do have consequences, and I really am, as somebody who represents an immigrant community whose parents are immigrants and who have been a community that has been targeted for so many years already under this administration. I mean, there's people that while I have the privilege to be able to live in this moment as an elected official, that I'm also going to use my voice to work towards the rights and finding justice for everyone. And I encourage everyone else to do the same.
I mean, right now, ensuring that everyone, you and your entire family, takes part in the census. And I know that there's a lot of complications around that. But, you know, that's the way in that we ensure that we have representation now. Getting out to vote, making sure that your registration is up to date. I mean, those are, it feels like the immediate need right now. And, you know, living here in Arizona, I'm constantly reminded by the fact that the state of Arizona didn't allow Native folks to vote in state elections until the 70s. And we weren't enfranchised to vote until 1948. And we're still fighting to get that representation now. And, you know, that's something that's front and center in my mind, and at least in my work in the next few months will be purely focused on that.
I think I would pretty much agree with what Teresa said. You know, maybe a little bit of modification on my part is I think that if, you know, people who are watching this, participating are people of color, I think it's time to, as Teresa said, you know, use your voice, you know, speak up, you know, and try to speak up in a way that people hear you, you know, not argumentative, but, you know, in a civil way. And I say that because I also find that for, you know, for white people, even those with the best of intentions or whatever, that there's just an unbelievable amount of, you know, stuff they don't know about people of color. And so it's time for people of color to speak out. And it really is time for white people to listen, you know, just listen with an open mind and open heart, because you're not always right about everything. There's a lot of things that have gone on that kind of myths that have been brought forward from from the beginning of time. I want to say 1619, but before that, from when Columbus landed. So speak up and listen. I think right now at this point in time, those are the key ingredients.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. We will take one question from the audience, and it will be okay. So COVID-related restrictions have brought many people outside who haven't previously spent much time outside. It has also highlighted the inequities of near-home outdoor access. What innovative ideas do you have or have you seen for using this current crisis to create real change to outdoor access? And so we'll take one or two answers to this question, and then I will wrap, and thank you all for your time.
I think one of the things that I've seen in terms of the trends is that there's currently a bike shortage in the United States, because during COVID, there's been an increase in bike sales. I think they've increased somewhere between like 200% or something, somewhere in that range. But what that's actually highlighted is a part of the industry that's actually not very diverse. And I think what we're going to see in the next few years is a lot more discussion about how that particular industry diversifies, especially now that they're going to be one of the few industries that actually have money. So those are my 2 cents.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's in relations to that in terms of transportation justice, and just looking at the way that our neighborhoods and our communities are being planned. For many of our folks, there's a lot of people that are being marginalized, and we've become such a car-heavy a country that I think we are in a really great opportunity to really rethink and reshape how people move around. And whether it's I certainly am a commuter, a bike commuter, and for me, my bike is also my therapy. And I can also see this being something that, whether it's from rural communities to urban areas, where just rethinking and reshaping how we think about transportation and how that impacts our communities, particularly Black, Indigenous, and communities of color, that they're at the forefront of a lot of those conversations, both at the local and state levels, moving forward. I feel like that is a really big opportunity that we should be jumping on right now.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Representative Angelica Rubio, Len Lessifer, apologies, Len, Teresa Baker, and Wayne here. Thank you so much for being a part of this panel and for sharing your knowledge, your experience, and the impact that you have been able to have through the energy you share and put out into the world. Really quick before you transition, is there anywhere that folks can get more information on the work you do, the organizations you lead, or anything like that? Do you want to give a quick 10-second find more at?
InSolidarityProject.com and vote the assholes out.
You can find information for me on Twitter at AN Rubio, and then also on Instagram at Rogue Rubio. And then you also on Facebook, you can find me there as well.
My social handles is at Len Nessifer, and I actually write quite a bit for journals and articles, so you can find me on Google Scholar.
The Civil Conversations Project for 2 years has been under the umbrella of High Country News. So you can go to High Country News magazine and search me. And the nonprofit that we started, we bought a domain, the civilconversationsproject.org. That'll be up and running in 3 weeks.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. I've enjoyed seeing your faces, but now I'm going to ask you to turn off your cameras because we have more faces to show. Bye. All right. Now it's just me, but I'd like to invite our special honorees for the evening to join me on camera. Oh, here we come. This is awesome. Hi, Parker. Hi, Crystal. Ooh, I'm really excited. And as these beautiful faces continue to join, these folks are, the folks who are on the panel are doing amazing work, and now we get to be introduced to more. And so this evening, these folks are being work that they're doing in the conservation, environmental, education, recreation, all the combination of those worlds. Some folks are community builders. Some folks work for federal agencies. Some folks work on crews. Some folks work in inner cities. Some folks work in rural areas. The diversity of experience and talent and intellect and ability is all here and present. And so I'm going to invite each of you to take 1 minute to share a little bit more about your work. And similarly, as I asked the panelists, to let folks know who you are, the impact that you are aiming to have in the world, and then where folks can learn more or a call to action. And so I will call you one at a time, and I'll give you the spotlight to be able to share. We'll start with Parker and Crystal. Go ahead and take 1 to 2 minutes and tell the world more about what you do.
Hi, thank you for honoring us tonight. And thank you, CJ. My name is Crystal Egley, and together with Parker McMullen Bushman, we're going to create a digital version of the Green Book. The original Green Book was published in order to provide Black travelers a list of safe businesses and spaces in the era of Jim Crow. And our modernized version will provide user-generated reviews for people of all marginalized identities to rate businesses on how inclusive and welcoming they were.
We really feel like this project will have world-changing implications. Finally, people of marginalized identities can locate safe and welcoming spaces. Allies can wisely spend their dollars at inclusive businesses. And we know that data talks, right? So economic motivates change. So businesses will have an opportunity to pay to see breakdowns on how people of different demographics experience customer service in their stores. We're looking for both individual donors and large investors, as well as people who just want to lend their talents and skills to the project, and people who can help elevate our work to the national stage. So if you would like to learn more, donate, and or support our work, please visit our website, inclusivejourneys.com, and that's inclusivejourneys with an S.com. Thank you very much.
I'd like to welcome Taisha to the stage.
Hello, everyone. This is Taisha Adams, and I just want to take a moment to thank folks for the nomination and being an honoree for Elevate Conservation. I am one of the commissioners for Colorado Parks and Wildlife. We oversee 55 state parks here in Colorado and also address wildlife management. And I also serve as a leader for Outdoor Afro in Colorado, as well as the new policy director for Outdoor Afro. And, you know, I started with Outdoor Afro almost 5 years ago as a participant under the tutelage of Christy Peoples and Jalen Balin and Roz, whose last name I cannot remember, I apologize. But it was during that time that I always had a relationship with the outdoors, and I just, you know, never had that relationship with other Black people. And so to get on the trail, to get on the land with other Black people here in Colorado has really been a transformational, life-changing experience. Not only the connection to the outdoors and to Black people who also have a love and a connection to the outdoors, but also leading in the outdoors. And so Rue always says, Rue Mapp, the founder of Outdoor Afro, says, change happens at the speed of relationships. And I have been shocked at how true that has stood as I continue to navigate these spaces here, this outdoor space, this environmental space this conservation space. And we all know the conservation is not a neutral term. And so I'm just really excited to be at this nexus right now with all of you, recognizing that we need deep roots of relationship to weather these storms that will continue to intensify. And so what is my call to action? I would say my call to action is get involved every day in every way, every dollar you spend, every decision that you have the privilege of making. You either are upholding, maintaining, strengthening, or dismantling and reimagining the system that we currently live in. And so a specific call for these folks on the call right now, those folks who are committed to the outdoors, whether it be recreation, policy, etc. Been involved in the Colorado Outdoor Partnership. I was at one of my first partnership in the outdoor conferences last year, where I met many of you. It was a powerful, powerful moment, and many of you served on the advisory council. It was so wonderful. And yet I go into this space and I'm one of two people of color in that room. And so I love having us talk on panels, and I love having us in magazines, and I love having us, behind the scenes in film and all the things, all the places. I want us where the most important decisions about life are being made. I want to see us there all the time. And when I don't, I raise a red flag. And I invite you to do the same. And I'm saying that co-op does not have the representation. It needs to be powerful. So I invite you to do the same. And then lastly, for Outdoor Afro, you can find us online, of course. We're in 30 states across the country, 90 leaders. But again, it's about meeting and it's about leading. We must be at the table when the most important decisions are being made. It's so important I had to say it twice. And so I leave you with, again, a thank you for the work that you do, for the fighting of the good fight. And I hope to continue to see you as this change it can take centuries to get here. It's going to take centuries to unpack what they've done and rebuild, reimagine, not, trying to dismantle the master's house using his tools, but really reimagining what house, what tools, where, when, with whom. All things are back on the table. And I'm so excited to be at the table with you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Taisha. Up next, we have Christian Giles with Environmental Learning for Kids.
Hello, my name is Christian Giles, and I'm currently attending the University of Denver as a junior with a major in environmental science and sociology. In addition to that, I am currently a part of the Environmental Learning for Kids Summer Employment Program, the Urban Rangers, as a college lead. Through my participation in ELK, I've had the opportunity to explore many outdoor spaces that I had no idea existed, while also having the privilege to work with and impact the lives of kids by exposing them to the many experiences that the outdoors have to offer, such as camping, fishing, backpacking, and many more activities. Much of these that students were doing for the first time, myself included. ELK has made a huge impact on my life personally, being the sole reason that I changed my career path and discovered that the outdoors isn't just for one group of people, but for everyone. So on behalf of ELK staff and the ELK family, we are happy to be honored here today. And we will continue to do our best to get as many kids and their families outdoors as possible. If you would like to support us, you can follow us on our social media. We have a Twitter and Instagram, Facebook, as well as support us in any way in our upcoming events. So just thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Christian. Dee, you are up next.
Hi, my name's Dee Callahan. I use they them pronouns. I identify as white and non-binary. This past summer, I was a crew leader for Northwest Corps, who is known for running several inclusion crews, including Indigenous, ESL, and the LGBT+ crew, which I have the honor. I think that in the context of conservation corps and trail work, it's really significant to have youth recognized and give them space to groups. And I think as a white person, it's my responsibility to educate other white people and to listen to Black voices, to elevate them, and also recognize that there would be no LGBTQ plus crew without the existence, power, and fight of Black women. And so I think that in terms of what you can do to support Northwest Youth Corps, if you know a youth or a person who would benefit from being in a space that is outdoors, that is inclusive and committed to creating that place for them to feel, to have a relationship with their land, Northwest Youth Corps has a program that's for them. And I think that Northwest Youth Corps is doing a lot of work to dismantle the basis of what the world is founded in, which is a lot of white supremacy. And so not just being a self-proclaimed ally, but being an active accomplice in that. And that's work that we're doing. So if you want to continue to support us, you can find us at nwucorps.org. And we're also on Instagram at northwest_youth.
Thank you so much, Dee. Up next, we have Jackie.
Hi all, my name is Jackie Radilla. I use the she, her, hers pronouns. I live in Leadville, Colorado, where I work with youth and families in my community to do outdoor education, direct programming, and community skills development. I also am a volunteer for Latino Outdoors here in the Colorado chapter and have partnered with the ladies in the Denver area with the resources that Get Outdoors Leadville has to offer, which is the organization I work for. I also serve on a couple different boards here locally and nationally that focus on outdoor recreation and access for youth. My passion lies in advocating for youth and their families so that they have opportunities to access the natural spaces, whether that's an experience, going on a picnic without having to worry about anything, to a backcountry backpacking experience. I work with my community to make that happen for them. And getting them the information that they need in the language that they speak and are more comfortable with, so that they have all the tools they need to head on out and experience the natural world like people with privilege are able to. You can support us. Our website is getoutdoorsleadville.org. And we are an initiative from Great Outdoors Colorado, part of the Generation Wild Coalitions. So you can learn more about us on those websites, and a quick Google search will lead you to us as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Jackie. And last but not least, Grace.
Hello, thank you for honoring us. My name is Grace Anderson, she, her pronouns, based on the Ohlone Territory in Oakland, California. Have led many lives as a backpacking instructor, as a climber, as a long distance cyclist, but am currently the co-director of PGM1, which stands for People of the Global Majority and the Outdoors, Nature and Environment. We envision a world that centers, uplifts, values, and empowers those most impacted by environmental harm and climate change, in particular Black, Indigenous, and people of color and of the global majority, to lead the way towards environmental justice and collective liberation. Yeah, I'll keep it short. Taisha said a lot that resonated with me, but I will say my call to action is to move resources. I think what continues to happen in the conservation community is the same people are doing the work and not moving resources to Black, Indigenous, and people of color to lead in the ways that we know our communities need and want. We have the power and the imagination within our communities to really take this movement to the next level. And so I'm excited for this moment and hope people will see it as an opportunity to like move resources and then also to step aside and give up power. Some calls to action outside of that is to follow us. We're at PGM1 Summit on Instagram and PGM1 on Facebook.
Thank you, Grace. Thank you, Parker. Thank you, Crystal. Thank you, Jackie. Thank you, Dee. Thank you, Taisha. Thank you all so much for the work and the energy that you contribute and invest into this world, into this field, into these communities on a daily basis. I wish that there were a room full of people here to give you a standing round of applause, but for now, you're just gonna have to take me and the couple hundred people who are cheering you on virtually. But I do want to thank you again so much for what you bring to this world and what you've shared here today. So for everyone who's listening, we're now in the final stretch of this program. One of the things that we did want to share in the end was a video. And before that, I want to address a couple of things. One, I want to thank you for being here. Zooms can be pretty one-sided with me here talking to my computer in a room. But I want to thank you for being here, for asking questions, and for listening to the voices and experiences of our panelists and honorees. I know some of you asked questions and we didn't have time to get to all of them. So what will happen to those questions that you asked? Hopefully we're going to share, our plan is to share more resources related to some of the issues that our speakers were talking about. And hopefully we will share your questions as well with some feedback from either our speakers and panelists or from the larger community. Thank you for asking those questions. Continue to ask those questions and to challenge the systems and the cultures and the places where we work and live. Here are a couple ways that I heard, and hopefully you picked up and heard more. If not, you can go back and watch the recording. One, this work needs to be prioritized. And by this work, not just the outdoors, but the communities who are connected to the outdoors and who have not been represented. Representative Rubio asked us, are we going to stay behind and go back to normal, or are we going to move forward? We got the reminders that all of our work is intersectional. We want to look forward to a future where fossil fuels do not restrict us. Grace literally just said that all folks should look at the power that they hold, and in spaces where it's important and where it's relevant and where it would cause progress, to step aside and give up that power. And Len reminded us that tribes should have a seat at the table when determining what is happening on their lands. I want to thank the sponsors of this event, American Whitewater, Conservation Communications, Grand Canyon Trust, and Fat Tire, along with the National Wildlife Federation, Nuestra Tierra, and more. Find out more about all 30 of these coalition partners and links mentioned in the event at elevateconservation.com. I want to, and because it's Latino Conservation Week, I want to introduce a video that we were planning to share on during this event, but that I'm going to encourage you to watch on your own time. So if you can, in honor of Latino Conservation Week, I invite you to go to imcheo.org. And if you would like to stay on this live stream, we will show it at the end of this video, but we know that we are 2 minutes over your time. Again, thank you. Thank you, first of all, to the panelists who shared their time in speaking and sharing their work and their truth. Thank you to you for attending. And thank you to everyone as we move forward with the action steps we've been given to make sure that the outdoors we step into is truly an outdoors that is for all. Thank you, everyone, and have a good night.